They never saw it coming. The music room fell silent as Marcus Johnson's fingers danced across the ivory keys, transforming the dusty old piano into a vessel of pure emotion. Ms. Peterson's smug smile had vanished, replaced by a look of utter disbelief. Just moments earlier, she thought she'd finally found the perfect opportunity to humiliate the quiet boy who never quite fit her idea of excellence. Now, she couldn't even meet his eyes. Marcus had always been invisible at Westridge High School in Oakland, California. Not the kind of invisible that comes from blending in, but the deliberate kind. The type that happens when someone decides you're not worth seeing. For 2 years, Ms. Peterson, the music appreciation teacher, had perfected the art of looking past him, her eyes skipping over his raised hand like it was nothing more than a flickering shadow. "Yo, it's like you got some kind of teacher-repelling force field," joked Darnell, sliding into the desk beside Marcus one morning. "She acts like you don't even exist." Marcus just shrugged, tapping his pencil against his notebook. Not from anxiety, just habit. "Guess I do." But today felt different. Ms. Peterson kept glancing his way, not with her usual dismissal, but with something that made Marcus's skin prickle. Anticipation. Planning. The kind of look that said, "I've been waiting for this." The lesson dragged on, a discussion about influences in modern music that Marcus could have contributed to effortlessly, but he remained silent, watching, waiting. Then, it happened. "Marcus," Ms. Peterson said, his name sounding foreign on her lips. "Since you seem so interested in our topic today, perhaps you'd like to share something with the class?" Heads turned. 28 pairs of eyes locked onto him. Marcus straightened in his seat. "About the jazz influences we've been discussing?" he asked, voice steady. "Actually," she replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, "I heard you mentioning your grandmother was a musician. The piano in the corner hasn't been used in months. Why don't you show us what you've learned from her?" The room shifted. Someone snickered. Another whispered something that made their neighbor laugh. Marcus felt the trap closing around him. This wasn't an invitation. It was an ambush. "Now?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Unless you'd rather not," Ms. Peterson replied, challenge glinting in her eyes. "I completely understand if you're not prepared." Marcus stood slowly, aware of every eye tracking his movement as he crossed the room. The piano was old, neglected, probably hadn't been tuned in years. He ran his fingers lightly over the keys, feeling their resistance. "Bet he can't even play chopsticks," someone muttered, followed by muffled laughter. Marcus sat down, his back straight, hands hovering over the keys. In that moment, he wasn't thinking about Ms. Peterson anymore. He wasn't thinking about his classmates or their expectations. He was thinking about his grandmother's hands, strong and graceful, guiding his own when he was just 6 years old. About the hours they'd spent together before she passed. About the legacy she'd left him that no one in this room knew anything about. He took a deep breath and began to play. The first notes hung in the air, tentative, questioning, before building into something more complex. His fingers found their rhythm, weaving through a jazz improvisation that would have made his grandmother proud. The melody started simple, then grew increasingly intricate, his left hand keeping a steady rhythm while his right created conversations between notes that spoke of struggle, of perseverance, of quiet dignity. The laughter stopped. The whispers died. Even the usual hallway noise seemed to fade away, as if the entire school was holding its breath. Marcus closed his eyes, letting the music flow through him. He wasn't just playing notes. He was telling his story. The story of being overlooked, underestimated, pushed aside, but also the story of inner strength, of knowledge held close, of talent nurtured in private until the perfect moment to reveal it. When the final chord faded, the silence that followed was absolute. Then, from the back of the room, someone started clapping. Others joined in, the applause building until it filled the space that his music had just occupied. "Damn," Darnell whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. "Where'd you learn to play like that?" Marcus didn't answer. He was looking at Ms. Peterson, whose face had drained of color. She stood frozen by her desk, knuckles white where she gripped her textbook. "That was," she started, clearing her throat. "Unexpected." "Was it?" Marcus asked, his voice carrying across the now silent room. "Or was it exactly what you expected not to happen?" Ms. Peterson's eyes narrowed. "Return to your seat, Marcus." "Why did you call me up here?" he pressed, still seated at the piano. "Of all the students in this class, why me?" "I don't appreciate your tone," she replied, but her voice lacked its usual authority. "And I didn't appreciate being set up to fail," Marcus countered. "You've been ignoring me for 2 years. The only time you acknowledge me is when you think I'll embarrass myself." The class was completely still now, watching the exchange with wide eyes. "That's enough," Ms. Peterson snapped. "This is still my classroom." "A classroom is supposed to be where people learn," Marcus said, standing up from the piano bench. "Not where teachers try to humiliate students they don't like." "Yo, he's right though," Darnell spoke up, breaking the tension. "You never call on him unless it's to make him look bad." "That's ridiculous," Ms. Peterson said, but her words lacked conviction. "Is it?" asked Jayla from the front row. "Because I've noticed it too." More voices joined in, the dam of silence breaking as students began sharing their own observations. Ms. Peterson's face flushed as she tried to regain control, but something fundamental had shifted in the room's dynamics. The careful hierarchy she'd constructed was crumbling. "Enough!" she finally shouted. "Open your textbooks to page 94, now." The class reluctantly complied, but the energy had changed. Students kept glancing between Marcus and Ms. Peterson, waiting to see what would happen next. For his part, Marcus returned to his seat, calm and composed. He had said what needed saying. His music had already spoken the rest. After class, a group gathered around him in the hallway. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone you could play like that?" Jayla asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Marcus adjusted his backpack strap. "Nobody ever asked." "Well, they're asking now," Darnell said, grinning. "Half the school's talking about what happened." By the next day, the story had spread through Westridge High like wildfire. People who had never spoken to Marcus before nodded in recognition as he passed. Teachers who barely knew his name suddenly remembered it. And Ms. Peterson, she taught her class with rigid formality, careful to call on students equally. Her eyes skipping over Marcus not because she couldn't see him, but because now, she couldn't bear to look at him. 2 weeks later, the school talent show poster appeared on the bulletin board. Marcus stood staring at it, considering. "You should sign up," said a voice beside him. It was Mr. Collins, the history teacher. "Talent like yours deserves an audience." Marcus nodded slowly. "Maybe I will." That night, he sat at his grandmother's piano in the corner of their small living room, fingers tracing the keys she had loved so much. "You were right, Grandma," he said softly to the empty room. "Music doesn't just make itself heard. Sometimes you have to make people listen." The night of the talent show, Marcus waited backstage, listening to the performances ahead of his. His mother had come, bringing his younger sisters who bounced with excitement. Even his father, who worked double shifts and rarely made school events, sat in the audience. When they called his name, Marcus walked onto the stage with steady steps. The lights were bright, the audience a blur. But as he sat at the piano, he felt completely calm. This time, when he played, it wasn't to prove anyone wrong. It was to honor what was right. The music flowed from a place of strength rather than defiance. In the third row, Miss Peterson sat with the other teachers, her expression unreadable. But for once, Marcus didn't care if she was watching or not. He wasn't playing for her approval anymore. As the final notes faded and the applause thundered through the auditorium, Marcus realized something important. Being underestimated had never been his weakness. It had been his greatest strength. It had taught him patience, perseverance, and the power of choosing the right moment to shine. In a world that's quick to judge and slow to listen, sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is to let your talent speak for itself. The people who try to dim your light are often the ones most afraid of what will happen when you truly begin to shine. So, if you're out there feeling overlooked or undervalued, remember Marcus's story. Keep practicing in the shadows. Keep honing your craft when no one's watching. Your moment will come. And when it does, make sure you're ready to play the song they never expected to hear. Because the sweetest music isn't just heard. It's felt, deep in the places where doubt once lived, replacing it with something far more powerful. The unshakable knowledge of your own worth. Did you know? Just one like from you can give me the motivation to create more awesome videos. And by subscribing with the notification bell on, you'll never miss out on my next amazing content. Don't forget to leave a comment below. Let me know what you think about this video or suggest a topic you'd like to see next.